Author Jonathan Safran Foer recently published a book entitled We Are the Weather: Saving the Planet Begins at Breakfast, where he argued that each of us should adopt a largely plant-based diet if you want to save the planet from catastrophic climate change. Hence, saving the planet begins when we eat, at breakfast and otherwise. Since such a switch can make a significant dent in the climate crisis if adopted by everyone, I definitely applaud this as a step in the right direction and think that he's definitely on to something. According to Project Drawdown, which I noted elsewhere is the most comprehensive plan ever put forth to reduce global warming, and of course we're reading it this week, the number one thing that we can do is to roll back global greenhouse gas emissions does not involve wind turbines, solar panels, or anything of the like. Instead, what is required is a cultural change regarding food. We need to waste far less of it and to switch to largely plant-based diets. Doing so will result in a staggering reduction of 137 gigatons of CO2 or equivalent gases. In comparison to this reduction, globally switching from fossil fuels to electricity generated by photovoltaic solar panels will roll back less than half this amount. We should, of course, work on exploring a variety of technologies to help reduce our emissions, but it's important to keep their relative impact in perspective. Worldwide, agriculture is the second largest emitter of greenhouse gases, yet between 1/3 and 1/2 of all the food that we produce on this planet is wasted. Regarding the switch to a largely plant-based diet, as I've noted elsewhere, the same amount of greenhouse gases are released in producing 1 pound of beef as are released in producing 30 pounds of lentils, also a great source of protein. I know, changing how we eat doesn't sound nearly as cool as a self-driving electric car, but it would nonetheless be 10 times better for the planet. This is not to say that these changes will be easy. Indeed, it's far easier to change cars, such as by making them electric, as it is to change people's actions. And what and how we eat is deeply personal and often central to our cultural identity. Nonetheless, we need to seriously roll up our sleeves and address the climate crisis at the breakfast table. Cowspiracy is a documentary on the environmental impact of eating meat. Here is how the filmmakers describe it. Cowspiracy, The Sustainability Secret, is a groundbreaking, feature-length environmental documentary following intrepid filmmaker Kip Anderson. Okay, I'm just reading it. That's what it says. As he uncovers the most destructive industry facing the planet today and investigates why the world's leading environmental organizations are too afraid to talk about it. Animal agriculture is the leading cause of deforestation. Water consumption and pollution is responsible for more greenhouse gases than the transportation industry and is a primary driver of rainforest extinction, species extinction, habitat loss, topsoil erosion, ocean dead zones, and virtually every other environmental ill. Yet it all goes on, almost entirely unchallenged. Wow. So note, though, that filmmaker Kip Anderson gets a few of his facts wrong. Animal production accounts for about 15% of global greenhouse gas emissions, not over 50%, as stated in the film. Nonetheless, it still is a striking, thought-provoking film. By the way, what do you make of the fact that Anderson builds his arguments on incorrect facts? Does it help by making the situation seem worse than it is, or undercut him by harming his credibility? So you may have known already about the environmental implications of a largely plant-based diet. But here's a little fact that may come as something of a surprise. While what we eat at breakfast and otherwise can have a real impact on the climate and the environment more generally, switching to a largely plant-based diet is not the biggest thing that we can do in terms of food. Instead, we need to waste less of it, far less of it. We need to waste less food. This, as Project Drawdown made clear, would have a bigger impact with respect to the climate change than switching to a largely plant-based diet. Hence, being freegan can be even more important than being vegan. Not sure what a freegan is? This is hardly surprising, as the word only recently entered the English language. As the venerable Oxford English Dictionary notes, A freegan is a person who eats discarded food, typically collected from the refuse of shops or restaurants for ethical or ecological reasons. I know, when you put it that way, it doesn't sound very appetizing. But the idea is important as food markets throw away an enormous amount of food. For example, if one egg in a carton is broken, supermarkets are required, at least here in the state of California, to discard the entire carton and the 11 other eggs. If they do so with freegans in mind, they might coordinate with local freegans to allow them to pick this up along with all sorts of otherwise discarded food, such as those past the sell-by date listed on the package. Sound like dumpster diving and a fringe activity? In many ways it is. But in one of the films that we will be watching, Being the Change, Peter Kalmus, who is a climate scientist at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena, notes how he and his family are freegans. While not mainstream yet, it certainly is gaining momentum. Waste It is a documentary on food waste. Here's how the filmmakers describe this film. Waste It, the story of food waste, attempts to change the way people buy, cook, recycle, and eat food. Through the eyes of chef heroes, audiences will see how the world's most influential chefs make the most of every kind of food, transforming what most people consider scraps into incredible dishes that create a more secure food system. Waste It explores the criminality of food waste and how it directly is contributing to climate change and shows us how each of us can make small changes, all of them delicious, to solve one of the greatest problems of the 21st century, i.e. the climate crisis. Produced by the late celebrity chef Anthony Bourdain, Waste It, the story of food waste, takes up this issue in interesting ways and considers whether we need to develop new relationships with food. In my little lecture that asks, "Are you an architect of the future?" I take up the issue of food and climate further. But for now, I'm curious to hear what you make of Cowspiracy and Waste It. They're both interesting films. What do you think?